Hey, what's up guys? It's Matt with Movement System. In this video, we're going to talk about strength and conditioning for cricket. So we're going to break down the sport analysis from an energy system perspective and a movement analysis perspective to determine what type of physiological traits we need to train for the sport of cricket. At the end of the video, we're going to review this program that I wrote for a cricket player, and we're going to talk about the choices that I made in terms of movement patterns, energy systems, sets and reps, and break that all down. Let's go ahead and dive into it. Okay, so we're going to start by breaking this down position by position. And I'm by no means a cricket expert, but as a strength and conditioning specialist, I'm going to help you guys determine the physiological needs of different positions of cricket, just purely from a sense of understanding the sport, understanding the movement patterns, understanding the energy system demands. So let's go ahead and start off with the batsman. So the batsman in cricket is going to be a very explosive movement. So one thing that's characteristic of the batsman is that it's a fairly static position and a quick rotation. So our training needs to reflect that. We're going to train a batsman to be very high rotational power. We're going to focus on hip rotation, trunk rotation. We're going to focus on smooth rotation and reactivity to position of the ball. This is a little bit different than the bowler, who's actually going to be running up and then providing an explosive movement. And for a bowler, we're actually going to see a little bit more of a repeated effort type of training. So a little bit of a longer effort and a little bit more ability to produce power over and over and over again. For a bowler, we're going to think about things like power skips and accelerating and decelerating off of big steps in these big long arm movements. So that's just some distinctions between the batsman and the bowler. And then from an energy system perspective, both of these positions are going to really be utilizing the ATP-PC system, so the ATP phosphocreatine system, which I actually did a whole video on. But that energy system is for quick, powerful movements. And with that energy system, we're going to be training with very quick, explosive movements. So when we get into the program design later, we're going to talk about how we actually do that, especially for athletes who are focused on single bout efforts, again, like that batsman. So aside from batsmen and bowlers, we also have to think about fielding and the athletic demands of that. And there are obviously many players in the field and relatively similar demands across fielders. Similar to how in baseball we have different field positions, outfield, infield, they're going to have slightly different demands, slightly more need for a high end speed the farther away from the play you are. So if you're an outfielder in baseball or if you're far away from the wicket in cricket, then you're going to need that high-end speed. And if you're closer, like an infieldman in baseball, or you're closer to the wicket in cricket, then you're going to need quick agility and be able to react to movements more quickly. Now, here's one thing that's really important that's overlooked by a lot of strength and conditioning coaches. Many field sport athletes, whether that's soccer, lacrosse, other sports like field hockey, are going to need to do reactive plays that are going to be changing direction as they're getting into position. Whereas fielding athletes in cricket and baseball are really just moving in one straight line towards the ball. So this makes exercises like L cone drills and T tests, the Illinois cone drill or Z cone drills, all those types of drills where we're focusing on turning and moving back and forth throughout the drill is a little bit less specific for a fielding position in baseball and cricket, and a little bit more specific for an athlete like a soccer player or a lacrosse player who's going to have to weave to maintain position and get in position for plays. So when we're thinking about programming strength and conditioning exercises for field players in cricket, we're going to think about a lot of linear speed, and we're going to think about powerful movements for once we get the ball. So for fielding for cricket, we're actually going to be a little bit more focused on creation of speed, generating linear speed, and actually also deceleration accurately to the ball. So we may see things like 20-yard sprints. We actually may see sprints from different positions because you're going to need to be able to sprint forward, diagonal, lateral, backwards. So we may see sprints where the athlete's starting on the ground or starting in a position that's not facing the end position of that 20-yard sprint. And that would be really sport specific, again, for the movement patterns and the demands of a cricket field athlete. And then the farther away you are in the field, the more that top end maximal velocity sprinting becomes a really specific and important adaptation. And the closer you are, the more rate of force development and fast lateral jumps, fast forward jumps, fast change of direction becomes more important. The closer you are to the play and the faster that you're going to have to react to the movement of the ball. So a drill that might be really effective for a field athlete that's very close to the play is a tennis ball drop, where a coach will drop a ball and an athlete will be 5 or 10 yards away from it and will try to get to that ball before 2 bounces are up. And this is also a really good drill to do as a competition with 2 athletes, where you're dropping a ball and 2 athletes are sprinting towards it and trying to get that ball before the second bounce, and you're making it a little bit of a competition that way. Before we move on to testing and programming, if you guys are watching this, make sure you go ahead and follow me on Instagram at The Movement System. And if you're watching this, or if you're practicing one of the movements that we talk about, you can go ahead and tag me on Instagram in your Instagram story, and I'll try to repost you. Okay, so what are some sport-specific tests for a cricket player? Now, the demands of cricket are different by position, but some movement patterns and energy systems that come out throughout are the fact that it's a long game, so we need some aerobic training. Personally, though, I think the anaerobic capacity is a little bit more sport specific for certain positions, especially batsmen. So something like a 300-yard shuttle run, where you're running 25 yards down and back touching cones, is really, really sport specific and a really good movement for cricket players. But you may also see something like a 1.5-mile run, or a change of direction drill like the 5-10-5 agility drill. And that 5-10-5 agility drill basically involves an athlete starting an athletic stance, running 5 yards one way, 10 yards another way, 5 yards the other way to end the test, and that's just showing quick change of direction, which is going to be an important trait and quality for fielding athletes in cricket. And then a test or a movement that's a little bit lower on my priority list based on my analysis of the sport, but I see a lot of people doing, is drills like these weaving drills. And like we said earlier, these are just a little bit more specific for fielding sports that are going to involve moving around different players and actually getting into different positions to basically follow a play, which is not really that specific for cricket or baseball. But for a lacrosse athlete or someone like that, this makes a lot of sense. Okay, so let's dive into the fun part, which is actually reviewing this program that I just wrote for a cricket player. Okay, so let's dive into it. What we'll see here is this is pre-season. So off-season cricket players may be getting general muscle hypertrophy, general physical preparedness, and conditioning. But as we move towards the preseason, this is when we want to introduce more sport-specific movement patterns that are going to really translate to performance. So let's go ahead and analyze day 1 here. What you can see is a hang clean program for 3 sets of 4 reps. A hang clean, if you're not familiar, we're basically doing a triple extension movement, a deadlift into a triple extension and then catching it at the shoulder level. So really powerful movement. This is, again, that energy system, that ATP PC system primarily for that hang clean, which is going to be sport specific to a lot of the movements in cricket. Next, you'll see a med ball rotational throw. And that med ball rotational throw is great for trunk rotation. So again, movement patterns involved in throwing, very thoracic rotation heavy, and even hip rotation. And that med ball throw, where we're actually rotating through the trunk, through the hips, really great movement pattern for training this. So you can do this as an underhand, and then basically turning the shoulders first and then the hips as you throw the ball towards a wall. You can do this with a partner. A lot of different ways to program a med ball throw, but again, find a way that works for your athletes. You could do these for distance with different weighted medicine balls, all kinds of good stuff there. Walking lunge comes next, and I actually specifically chose walking lunge over reverse lunge, and here's why. A reverse lunge is eccentric focused. This is a really great exercise. I like it for hypertrophy, for a rehab setting, but it doesn't involve a high deceleration impulse. So a walking lunge, where you actually step and your foot hits the ground and you have to decelerate your body, that gives a little bit more of that impulse. And especially for those large stepping movements of cricket, we're going to have to step and slow yourself down to change velocity quickly. That walking lunge is going to be a little bit more sport specific, a little bit more carryover than a reverse lunge. And then a lat pullover. This is going to be an overhead straight arm movement, typically leaning back over a bench with a dumbbell. And again, this is an overhead movement. We're going to be focusing on pulling the arm through. And that again replicates a longer lever arm throwing motion with that lat pullover. Moving into a single leg RDL. This is great for hip stability, getting stable on one leg, reaching basically a dumbbell towards the opposite leg as you hinge on one hip. And then what you'll see is I chose a single arm overhead carry. So this could be with a kettlebell, this could be with a dumbbell, really anything you can grab that's weighted and bring it overhead. And this is just more focused on general trunk stability and conditioning of your back, upper back, lower back, core, to be able to hold your single arm overhead and do a carry motion or even a marching motion with that weight overhead. And then lastly, just programming in some rotator cuff, especially with these high velocity throwing sports. It's really important just to keep that rotator cuff healthy, maybe some external rotations, maybe some stability work. Kind of left that open for how you would want to go about that rotator cuff work. So that'd be day 1, and then moving into day 2, what you'll see is a little bit of linear speed work. You'll see that 20-yard sprint programmed, 6 sets of just 1 rep, meaning 20 yards. So we're going to give a good amount of rest there. If that 20-yard sprint is taking a few seconds, say 2, 3, 4 seconds, we're going to want a good at least 10 times, ideally 20 times that amount of rest. So if it's taking 4 seconds, at least resting for 80 seconds there. And that's just to make sure that we're actually generating that high power, high maximal velocity sprint and that high rate of force development each and every rep of those 6. So it's not a lot of reps. We're not really focusing on fatiguing the athlete. We're actually focusing on max output on each of those sets. All right, and then moving on to power skips. This is a little bit more extension focused, getting the full hip extension and then working in some reciprocal movements of the upper body here. So I really like a power skip for athletes like a cricket player or a field sport athlete. A lot of ways you could do that, but you could skip for height, you could skip for distance. Really just, again, focused on powerful, explosive skipping in this exercise. And you can see here B1, B2, that's supersetted with lateral jumps. So lateral jumps is just making sure that we're also multi-planar in our training program. If our athletes are going to be performing movements in different planes, they're going to have to move laterally to get to a ball, to change positions, then we actually need that to exist in our training program as well. So you can see lateral jumps here are programmed 4 sets of 4. And that's a good amount that you're going to be jumping explosively still. You can focus on the way that you're landing, the mechanics of this. You can even add a hurdle that you're jumping over. Lots of options there, but a really good plyometric movement to be programming in the preseason. And then right after that, focused on a movement with strength in the, again, frontal plane here. So lateral movement, it's in the frontal plane. Lateral lunge, we're stepping and then catching ourselves using the hip abductor muscles on the outside of the hips there. Again, really important movement for getting into different positions and being agile, especially as a fielder. So a really good movement to program there. And then you'll see we just ended with rows and weighted push-ups and just keeping some back and chest strength in there as well. Can't neglect the upper body. And those are programmed sets of 8, sets of 10, and even sets of 10 are fine in the preseason. You have more of a power focus and plyometric focus for the upper part of that day 2, and a little bit of strength worked in for the lower part of that program. All right, guys, I hope that video was helpful for you. If it was, go ahead and smash that like button. If you want to learn more, go ahead and subscribe. If you have any questions, go ahead and leave a comment below, and make sure you go ahead and join the Strength and Conditioning Study Group on Facebook to learn more. And if you want me to do a follow-up video on a different sport analysis, go ahead and leave that in the comments below. If you want me to analyze football, soccer, something like that, if there's a lot of interest, I'll go ahead and do those. All right, guys, thanks. I'll catch you in the next one.